For the past 50 years, the phenomenon of unidentified flying objects, commonly referred to as UFOs, has frequently made the headlines. Exploited by tabloids, ridiculed by skeptics, and for the most part scorned by the scientific community, the UFO phenomenon has captured popular imagination. In Canada, surveys confirm that the public is interested in unidentified flying objects. In the United States, dozens of books on the subject are published each year, and Hollywood generally comes out with at least one film per season. The U.S. has the largest UFO group in the world, called MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. Its members gather every year at the International UFO Symposium. Webmaster for the internet site UFOcity.com and co-author of Left at East Gate, Peter Robbins is a well-known New York artist. He is quite familiar with the community of UFO hunters.
We are a wildly varying lot of people. We are as different as any random section of society, I think. What unites us is an intellectual curiosity, maybe a little bit of a spirit of adventure. Most of us like digging either allegorically or in a library or actually in the field. Most of us are somewhat idealistic, which usually means we're somewhat naive.
They are obviously motivated by a desire to try and understand what's happening. Often, when you scratch beneath the surface, you find a desire to believe in the existence of extraterrestrials. Behind their impartial front, we can see their desire to believe.
We actually are interested in the truth about something that is a genuine mystery. Some of us have PhDs in the natural sciences. Many of us have backgrounds in the arts, and we come to it from a creative sensibility.
It is precisely this eclectic attitude that has greatly contributed to tarnishing the reputation of the UFO community. As soon as a UFO is observed, UFO hunters find themselves shoulder to shoulder with journalists at the site where it was observed, both trying to make the most out of it. One camp sees it as a great news story, while the other camp sees an opportunity to talk about their wild theories. Worldwide cover-ups, alien abductions, or a threat of an alien invasion. Comments made by serious researchers often become buried in the tall tales which attract the media. Caught up in this three-ring circus of ideology, it is not surprising that over the years, UFO hunters have gained the reputation of attracting crackpots.
Like many fields of research or natural interest, we as a group have grown somewhat more sophisticated over the years. We have seen more frauds. We have seen more genuine, remarkably important breakthroughs in research. We are a bit better organized. We are maybe a little bit more respected by the general population, but not so much.
Over the years, UFO groups have been forced to evolve according to the interests of their members. Their interest is often tempered by the events themselves and by pressure from the media. UFOs are not the same today as they were years ago. To better understand this evolution, we have to go back to the Kenneth Arnold affair in 1947, which spawned the expression, flying saucer. No one is better qualified to lead us back in time than French sociologist Pierre Lagrange, a research scientist with the Center for Sociology of Innovation in Paris. Pierre has written several reports on UFO studies, and over the past few years, he has gained recognition as one of the world's leading authorities in the field of UFO history.
The Kenneth Arnold affair marked the beginning of flying saucers. That was when the expression flying saucer was first invented. His story happened on June 24, 1947. He was a 32-year-old private pilot and businessman who saw strange discs flying over Mount Rainier, Washington, in the American Northwest. According to Arnold, they were flying twice as fast as the speed of sound. and they had an unusual shape. They were not exactly saucer-shaped. They were rounded in the front and triangular in the back.
And he described their flight as saucers skimming over the water. And when he reported this to a reporter, a news reporter, the journalist wrote down flying saucers, and the name was born and has been with us ever since.
The objects seen by Kenneth Arnold were probably nothing more than a flock of migrating birds. However, his story gave birth to the modern era of flying saucers. Back in 1947, unidentified flying objects were not synonymous with extraterrestrial spacecraft.
At the time, back in 1947, Kenneth Arnold thought he was seeing secret weapons. Obviously, the prospect of extraterrestrials was soon raised. If we look back at the first articles written in the press on June 26 and 27, 1947, the objects were not only presented as extraterrestrial airships. That was just one theory among others. The theory of secret aircraft was the most popular.
The day after Kenneth Arnold's observation, the U.S. Army put up a wall of silence and took extraordinary defense measures.
Planes are on patrol for flying saucers. Cameras installed to photograph them. Portland, Oregon, the area from which came the first weird reports.
However, despite all the military's preparations, an entire fleet of flying saucers seemed to be descending upon the United States. Throughout the country, Americans were claiming to have seen unidentified flying objects.
A lot of people these days, they're seeing flying saucers everywhere. Flocks of fantastic discs flying through the air.
Since the Army was refusing to release these reports to the public, small groups of 2 or 3 people each began collecting information on these sightings.
To be looking for the mysterious disc.
It was the dawn of ufology, the study of UFOs.
There's a flying saucer with milk.
The first ufologists appeared in the 1950s in groups such as NECAP and APRO, which integrated a large mass of scattered information. At first, UFOs were only seen flying in the sky. They hovered and flew away, but didn't land. Then gradually stories began pouring in about landings. Investigators changed their view over time.
History professor at Temple University in Philadelphia, David Jacobs is the author of the famous UFO controversy in America.
Well, I think that the role of some of the early UFO organizations like APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, and NICAP, National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon, in the overall controversy over UFOs was really very, very important. I think that these are groups that continue to collect reports, they analyzed reports, they kept the subject in front of the public, and helped to also pioneer methodology for how you can do this, how you can actually investigate reports.
It was in this fervor of the 1950s that people began speculating that these unidentified flying objects were of alien origin. These speculations soon became the most popular way of interpreting these objects. Left in the dark, the more conservative researchers who refused to share this opinion without an argument were stigmatized as ignorant or having little faith by those who supported the theory. Now, 50 years after that initial sighting by Kenneth Arnold, we can only wonder how UFOs, which were originally thought to be top-secret weapons, came to be thought of as interplanetary vehicles. How is it that extraterrestrials have become the focus of UFO study?
One of the first people to introduce the idea that flying saucers were of alien origin was Donald Keyhoe, a former member of the U.S. military who became a journalist, and while working for True magazine in 1949 was assigned to investigate the story. Keyhoe was rather skeptical at first, since most of the contacts he had kept in the Army told him there was nothing to the story. But as he dug deeper, he began to think that the military wasn't telling him everything they knew, that there may be something to the story after all. The article that he published in the January 1950 issue of True was one of the first to really popularize the alien theory.
3 years later, Donald Keyhoe wrote Flying Saucers from Outer Space, whose popularity at bookstores further entrenched the theory that UFOs were of alien origin. From there on, lines were drawn between those who believed in extraterrestrials and those who didn't. America was debating over whether or not unidentified flying objects were alien in origin, on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, France was experiencing an unprecedented wave of UFO sightings. Up until then, UFOs were just strange things flying around in the sky. But now they seem to be landing everywhere. Even worse, the occupants of these spaceships were strolling around on our planet. One of the most striking stories happened to Marius Deville from Carouble in northern France on September 10th, 1954.
I heard my dog barking, and it didn't sound normal to me. At first, I just ignored him, but then I decided to go see what he was barking about. I came over here, and I saw two men, or rather, two beings.
How far away were they?
They were on the other side of that road there, about 12, 15 feet away.
Can you tell us what they looked like?
They were pretty small. I'd say about 3 feet tall.
So your flying saucer was over there. How did it leave?
Well, it went straight up about 150 feet.
Straight up, like that?
Well, that's when it changed into a ball of fire and headed east.
In the 1960s, a whole new generation of investigators appeared on the scene, like Jon Keel, who wrote an entire series of books. He also investigated matters that did not seem to interest other people. He examined things that were outside of the box, things that seemed UFO-related, but which were still on the fringe. With investigators like Jon Keel, it wasn't just a matter of aliens visiting us in their flying saucers. Keel's perspective was much larger and more complex, touching on both ecology and the occult, with phenomena that might be linked to our basic human nature. Some people proposed psychological theories for his phenomena. Keel was now in the area of parapsychology, where things were happening to our society other than simple visits by extraterrestrials. Thanks to Jon Keel, a movement began in the late 70s that included both the UFOs and paranormal phenomena by people who took an interest in these things. They believed that the phenomena were closely linked to the witnesses.
The 1970s was also when the U.S. Air Force lost interest in UFOs. In parallel with the work being done by Jon Keel, other researchers joined the cause, often from university backgrounds, filling in the void left by the military.
In the 1970s in particular, after the Air Force in the United States stopped its Blue Book, Project Blue Book, what happened is that it was almost like people were finally free to come out in the open. Those who were brave could come out in the open, and they could now begin to talk about UFO research, do it openly, work together. That's why Alan Hynek formed the Center for UFO Studies in 1973. We had a scientific advisory board of fairly distinguished scientists. And this went on. There was a flowering of very serious UFO research in the 1970s that had begun in the 1960s. It lasted some into the